Okay, students, we're going to jump right into the test review. Again, your exam is tomorrow. If you have any questions, email me, Mr. Palacios. Okay, first question talks about square roots. So again, in order to get rid of a square root, you have to do the square, as you see in this step right here. In order to get rid of a square root, you have to do a square. So in this case, I want to get rid of that square root. I'm going to square this. Okay, so it's going to be x equals 49 square, and whatever your answer is, 49 square, that is your answer. But this one right here, we have to get rid of this negative 5. So in order for us to get rid of the negative 5, we're going to add 5. Whatever we do to one side, you have to do it to the other side. So in this case, this question is going to be negative x equals 8. And the same idea, we're going to square them both. And we're going to get x equaling 64. Okay, this one's a little more complicated because there's a 2 in the front, but the same principle. So 2 radical x plus 3 equals 11. We're going to minus 3. And we're going to get 2 radical x equals 8. In order to get rid of this 2, we have to divide by 2. We have to divide by 2. Okay? So again, in order to get rid of this 2, I'm going to divide. These 2's cancel out. Now I'm going to have radical x equaling 4. And again, the same thing. I'm going to square it. I'm going to square it. I'm going to get x equaling 16. Okay? Guys, I'm doing this on a new software today, and I'm only limited to 15 minutes. So I'm not going to go over every single question today, but I'm going to go over at least one question per topic. So again, anytime you have a radical, in order to get something out of the radical, you have to square it. Okay? All right. Inverse. We talked about inverse. In order to do inverses, again, 2 ways you can do it. You can plug it into a calculator, or you can actually do the work. In this case, we're going to make this y. Okay, we're going to make this y. And again, in order to do it, you're going to flip the y and the x. So this is now going to become x, and this is going to become y. Okay, from there you distribute. You get 3y equals 3y minus 3 equals x. Again, in order to find the inverse, you have to flip the x with the y. I add 3. Add 3. This is going to be x plus 3 equals 3y. I divide by 3 because I'm trying to get y by itself. So here's where a lot of you guys made your mistakes last week. X over 3, you cannot do the x divided by 3, so we just leave it as x divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, so it's going to be plus 1. So this is going to be your inverse answer. Okay, so again, inverse, replace the x and y. Okay, a lot of you guys struggle with this, even and odd, even and odd. So in order to find even and odd, you have to find f of negative x, and you have to find negative f of x, and they have to equal each other. So this has to equal that. Okay, in this question, the work is done. So we change this into negative. We change that into negative. We solve, we got this. This question, we change the entire thing. So the entire equation changes. So now that is congruent to that. So that's why this makes this an odd integer. Again, in order to find odd functions, f of negative x has to equal negative f of x. Okay, I'll come back and do an example of that so that way we can see it. Okay, solving for x and y, we talked about this. This is, again, you have to make the variables be the same. Excuse me, the coefficients be the same. So I'll change x. I'll change x into 4. I'll change y into 3. I'm going to multiply both equations. So the top one is going to be 12x plus 8y equals 32. Bottom equation is going to be 12x minus 9y equals negative 36. And because they're both positive, I'm going to subtract, and then we're going to go from there. So we're going to have, let me see, 17y equals 36, 32, 8, I believe 68. And then we go from there, okay? And then you replace back in. So that question is pretty straightforward. Again, solve algebraically for x. Again, we talked about this. It's probably the last question we're going to go over in this topic to save time, because again, I only have 15 minutes for this video. going to minus 2. I'm going to minus 2. That cancels out. I'm going to have x plus 3 equals 4. And again, in order to do this, I'm going to square root them. So now I'm going to have x plus 3 equals 16, and then I'm going to go from there. Please remember, if you have time tomorrow to do your check, okay, your check means when you get your answer, you plug it back in. So if the answer here is x equals 13, check it to make sure it worked. Again, please check it to make sure it works. So what you would do, 13 plus 3 plus 2, 13 plus 3 is 16, square root of 16 is 4, 4 plus 2 gives me my 6. So please make sure you check your work. Okay. Factoring. Now, we talked about factoring yesterday in terms of how we group them. So we talked about all these factoring in terms of to group them. So the key to this question is just grouping them. So we notice that this x plus 5 and x plus 5 is the same. So my first factor is going to be x plus 5. Then I'm just going to simply bring down my next one, which is a minus 6. Same thing here. We know that they both have x minus 7. And I'm going to bring the 2 on the outside down, so it's simply going to be 3x, and there's going to be 2. The 3x is here, and the 2 is there, okay? Okay. Prove is an odd function. I'm going to give you one odd function question, and we'll go from there. In order to find an odd function, this has to equal this. So what does that mean? I'm going to take my question. My original question, I'm going to change all the x's into negative. Change all my x's into negatives. Okay? That's a negative, okay? So, negative x to the third is simply going to be negative x to the third. A negative and a negative becomes positive. Because there's a negative here and there's a negative here. They become positive. I did the first one. Now the second one I'm going to do. Negative f of x means I take my original equation, which is x to the third minus 3x, put a parentheses around it, and I make it negative on the outside. So all these things change. Just multiplication. Remember, there's a negative 1 here. So this is going to be negative x to the third. A negative and a negative is a positive. So look, my negative f of x equals that. This and this are the same. So is this odd? Yes, it's odd because f of negative x equals negative f of x. That's how you tell it's odd, okay? Okay. We'll skip through that. We just talked about this. This is more multiplication. You factor in each expression, so you're going to kind of factor out. Okay? And again, for a, just to show you, add the 3x plus 5. And then since the second factor is the same, it's simply going to be 3x minus 10. And again, guys, I'm sorry I'm rushing through. I have a new software, and it's only allowing me 15 minutes. Okay, same thing here. You minus the add 15 to both sides. You go from there. And just remember, you do have a 3 here in front. Because you have the 3 in front, you do have to divide by 3. Okay? You do have to divide by 3 to cancel these out. Okay? And then again, from there, you're going to have to go square. Okay. We talked about negative inverses again. You change the x, you change the y. Odd functions. We talked about odd functions again. You're going to create one that's g of x, g of negative x. You're going to create one that's negative g of x. If you're struggling with this question, rewind the video back to look at that question I went over. Okay. I think this is the last big part. 2 more big parts. Okay. You're just checking to see if you did it right. You're just going to go back and forth. So all you're doing is you're just kind of grouping it to make sure that these 2 worked. Okay? So let's talk about grouping. I'm going to put a parentheses here and put a parentheses here so that way you can see the groups. I'm going to look at this question and figure out the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor in this question is x. Then I have left with x plus 5. Same thing here. I'm going to find the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor of this is 4. I'm left with x plus 5. So I know that these two are similar. So my first one is x plus 5. And then my second one, I know I have an x and I have a 4. So it's going to be x plus 4. Okay. Rate of change, 2 and 6. So I got to look at 2. I look at 6. Okay. And again, I don't have that much time. So my first coordinates are going to be 2, 160. And this is going to be 680. And I'm simply going to use the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay. Here, use calculator. And then get your numbers for 2 and 6. And then you figure out which one has a greater change. Okay. Sorry, I'm speeding through them down to 4 minutes. We talked about that question already. Odd function, even function. And so just to be clear, even, the original function has to equal f of negative x. And odd, h of negative x has to equal negative h of x. Okay. Okay. We talked about Zaria's technique. Again, bring it down. Get the greatest common factor of this. Get the greatest common factor of that. Greatest common factor is 5x. Bring everything out. It'll be x plus 3. Same thing. Greatest common factor is 2. This is going to be x plus 3. And you got your 2 x's, you got your 2 3's. Okay. Inverse function. We talked about this in class, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it. You can use the calculator. And if you use the calculator, if you have x and y, the inverse is going to be yx. That is your inverse. Okay. If you want to know how to answer this question, check the email. Dariana did a good job of answering this question. Algebraically, I think we struggled with this one a little bit in class. But again, just remember something. There's a negative 1 here. Oops. There's a negative 1 there. Okay, so if there's a negative 1 there, that means eventually, once you minus 3 and you minus 3, you're going to have to divide by negative 1. So just might be mindful of that one, okay? Okay, let me see. Let's talk about this question as our last question. I have about 2 minutes left. Let me extend the page for this one. This is a little more complicated. The greatest common factor to this whole equation, I'm looking, is going to be 3x. Okay, it's going to be 3x. Then I'm going to factor everything out. So I'm going to factor the first one is going to be 2x to the third. The next one is going to be 3x to the second. The next one is going to be 8x. And the last one is going to be 12. Sorry, that's a 12 is really small. Then I'm going to factor this top part out. So then I'm going to bring this in, and I'm going to bring this in. So looking at this, the greatest common factor is going to be x squared. I break it down, it's going to be 2x plus 1. I look at this again, that's at a 12, yeah. So the greatest common factor is going to be 4. That's going to be the same thing, 2x plus 1. So my final answer is going to look like this. I'm going to have x squared plus 4. I'm going to have 2x plus 1 right here, and then I'm going to have 3x. Okay? Guys, real quickly, if you have any questions or concerns and I didn't go over something, please email me tonight. I will be available probably after 8:30. My son has his Christmas show tonight, so don't wait around for emails. If you need extra help, I'll try to be in a little early tomorrow to study. Good luck. Take care. And again, if you need to email me, dpeters@bxcsm.org. And again, sorry for the fastness. I have a new video now. It only gives me